Hello, welcome to another episode of Wisdom Personified Conversations with Dudu Msomi. I am so happy to have you back with us. I have today one of the most amazing women we have in South Africa, Nicola Tyler. She is the director of Business Results Group, BRG. Nicola, how are you?
I'm well, thanks, Dudu.
Thank you so much for making the time after trying to track you for a while. I shall not say thank you to COVID because it came with a lot of pain, but you being rooted at home has helped this opportunity to be a reality. Um, I mean, I've known you for a couple of years now, but I don't think we've ever spoken about, your upbringing. What were your most treasured memories as a child? Do you have siblings?
I do actually. I've got a brother and a sister. I'm the youngest. I've got an older brother, and my sister's the middle child. So one of each.
And what did you get up to as a child?
Interestingly, we were born into a family of business owners and entrepreneurs. So we grew up in a very busy house. Everyone was working pretty much most of the time. Um, and our first home was actually on a canal in the UK, on a where barges used to go. So I even remember horses pulling barges and going through locks as a child. And then later on, we moved out of town into the countryside. So that was more around trees and fields and things like that.
Beautiful. That sounds angelic. Um, you tell the story about having failed school twice. You said in one media interview that I read, failing at such a young age was a gift. Can you share your wisdom about this and hopefully reach someone who's watching us today who is experiencing failure and help them to think their failure is a gift and give them a vision toward end?
Hmm. Yeah, it was kind of a big deal in my life. I didn't anticipate that I would fail, but I also didn't think that I was going to succeed either. So you kind of know in the back of your mind that something's coming and it's probably not the answer your parents want. So I remember sitting on the toilet in the bathroom with my exam results, and it was on a little piece of paper, a bit like you used to get your PIN code from the bank, you know, the dot matrix things. And I took the piece of paper into the bathroom and I sat on the toilet, and my mother's on the other side of the door. And I think I've got to open this now. And so she's standing on the outside of the bathroom saying, "How did you do?" And I said, "Mom, I failed." And she said, "What do you mean you failed?" She said, "You must have passed something." I said, "No, Mom, I failed." She said, "Everything?" I said, "All of them." She said, "No." So I sat on the toilet with the lid down, obviously, and I was sitting there thinking, I'm not coming out, but I know I've got to at some stage. And eventually she persuades me to sort of come out of the bathroom. And she looked at me and she said, "You'll be fine."
That's not the reaction my mother will have.
Oh, I know. She just said, "You'll be fine." So I was then promptly sent back to school to try and have another go. And it was sort of coinciding with my parents moving house. So I ended up staying with family friends. And there was a very, very tragic family incident where my closest friend at the time's brother passed away in the middle of me staying them with them, in the middle of me doing retakes of my exams.
Oh my.
So I was then sort of moved around to a couple of other homes, and I failed them again. So,
Wow.
and I've never forgotten that the first time I went to a graduation was when I spoke at the Jeppe Girls High School in Johannesburg. That was the first ever graduation I went to, which was many, many moons after leaving school. And my graduation was bumping into the chemistry teacher outside the staff room. I'd finished my last exam. And I've never forgotten, I had a denim jacket on and I felt like vaguely rebellious. I wasn't a rebellious child. I wasn't sort of pushing the wrong buttons and sneaking behind bushes and, you know, smoking behind the tennis court. I was a very sort of compliant child, but I just kept failing and nobody could quite figure out why. And I bumped into to the teacher and she said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm actually not really sure where to go." And she said, "Well, you can go now." I said, "You mean I can leave?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Like, I can leave the premises. I don't have to come back," which was kind of like a dream coming true because I really didn't enjoy school. And she said, "Yes, you can go now, Nick. You can go."
Wow.
And I left the school and I never came back. So it was probably, you're then set with some challenges because you enter a system. This was in the UK. But you couldn't get any job in England if you didn't have 5 passes, basically. You couldn't get to the police force. You couldn't get to work in a greengrocer's. You couldn't do anything. So the only job I could get was the only thing I could do. So I got a job as a groom for the Worcestershire Hunt. And I'm not proud of having worked in hunting. I later became a vegan and a vegetarian. But that was the only thing I could do was ride a horse. So I rode a horse and mucked out stables and got every second Sunday off. It was a kind of a hard manual labor job. Literally, it was probably the hardest job I've ever had. You wake up at 5, you go to bed at 10. You get paid a pittance, but at least you've got a place to stay and a horse to ride. And after a year, I realized that's probably not, that's not going to get me anywhere in life. So I managed to get into a college where on the day of the admissions, they sort of went down the list to see which courses I would qualify for. And I'd sort of got my dad to speak to someone to think I could get in like through the back door, but on the day that didn't happen. So I ended up with an admissions officer. I was the last man standing. Everyone has gone to class and I'm standing there. And he's going down the list from A to Z, literally. And he kept saying, "No, love, you can't do that. Mm-mm.
Oh, wow.
No, you can't do that." And eventually he got to the bottom and it said secretarial studies 2 years. And he said, "No, love, you can't do that." And then right underneath that was like a 1-year secretarial administrator course. And he said, "I think she might let you go. She might let you attend." So I was sent across the campus. I was the only kid outside of a class. And I went and knocked on the door of an already full class. And I was let in and I said to the teacher, her name was Sheila Hurlbat. And I said, "I think this is the only course I can do." So she said, "Come in, sit down." So she welcomed me in and I sat down that day next to one of my closest friends today, Charlotte. And Sheila somehow saw something in me that other teachers didn't see. And she just knew how to work me. And I literally went from failing everything to passing everything.
Wow.
Overnight. It was the weirdest thing.
Nicola, what if we never get that person? How do we get ourselves out of that failure cycle?
Well, I decided when I realized that I was not fitting the system, I made a decision for myself, or maybe a personal challenge, and I said, I wonder how far you can go without it. I wonder how far you can go in life without an education. And it's not to say I didn't have any education, but I definitely didn't pass the system. The system and me did not make friends. So I think at some point you decide to challenge yourself. And I think I see failure as a gift, because when you've failed badly, because that's quite a big thing to fail school twice. When you failed badly, you're not afraid to experiment because you're not trying to meet any other expectation but your own.
Yeah.
So it's almost as if you don't have to prove yourself to someone, you just have to prove yourself to yourself. So experimentation and trying and failing, I think I've probably got more confidence in that in business, perhaps in other areas, but yeah.
It's a good learning ground for business, that's for sure. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So you are the director of Business Results Group, which we call BRG. What does BRG do?
BRG is, I think it's amazing. It's an incredible business. It's called Business Results Group because we said we focus on generating business results. But fundamentally, what we do is we grow leaders. We help build leadership capability in organizations, and we also help facilitate strategic conversations. So it's basically supporting businesses, mostly execs, to make decisions and also get the most out of their people.
And how has the journey been?
Long and interesting. First started the business in 97, changed its name from Competitive Thinking to Business Results Group, and I think it was 2001, 2002. And it's fascinating because we started out almost as a one pony show. We represented Edward de Bono and his work, largely because of my history of having worked with Edward. But then over the years, we've brought on board more products. And then at the end, towards the end of 2014, I was joined by my now business partner, Kirsty Thompson. And the business is actually, it's a solid business. It represents international authors and their intellectual property. So we focus mostly, if not almost exclusively, on international content. So we try and make that content accessible and hopefully vaguely affordable to South African businesses. Yeah. So we find a lot of companies that are multinationals gravitate towards our products because you can get the same program all over the world.
And we met when I was at Saatchi and Saatchi advertising around the De Bono work. You are a master trainer in a full range of De Bono thinking tools. What attracts you to his work?
It's incredible, actually, Dudu. I mean, when did we meet? When were you at Saatchi?
90 something. We met.
Yeah, it must have been. It was
because
before
I left
2000.
Saatchi in 2001.
Wow, gosh. So we've known each other for a long time.
Yeah.
The De Bono work, when I got the opportunity to work with De Bono, and that was sort of around the mid-90s, I never anticipated that I would get so attached to his methods. So I was offered a role in working with him, and my first flight with him was, I think, 31 flights in 54 days. We went around the world, halfway back again, and carried on. It was just remarkable. Wow. I never imagined in my wildest dreams I'd get to have an experience like that. And quite literally, we dined with presidents and danced with paupers, literally, in that 54 days. And I realized something quite fundamental about humanity then. And I've always tried to quote it and tried to be consistent with it. But I always say richer than and smarter than does not equal better than. Yeah. So I genuinely experienced extremely successful people, wealthy people, huge sort of political influencers and things like that. And we literally danced with an Iban tribe chief and his family in rural Sarawak, outside, about a 2-hour boat ride on a muddy river outside of Kuching, on the northern part of Borneo. And you go up this muddy path and you go up this wooden log and you're in the middle of the strangest of environments. And above us were hanging human skulls hanging from the ceiling.
Oh my gosh.
Not, I mean, they were historically, what's it, cannibals, or I think it's, yeah, something, there was a lot of stuff that went on. And what was incredible is wherever Edward trained his methodologies, you know, whether it was in a boardroom in Japan or a rural community, they worked. It transcended everything. It transcended language. It transcended any kind of difference that we seem to uphold. All these unconscious biases almost disappear when you enter the world of thinking. Yes. Because you're surfacing thoughts. So at the end of this journey of working with Edward, I was now sort of almost addicted to thinking. I think it probably has been a healthy and an unhealthy addiction for the last 20 odd years. but just the value of teaching thinking, which I think is possibly what I was doing as a kid. I was asking questions about what people were teaching me instead of remembering what people were teaching me.
We share that in common.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just thought it was incredible. And thinking, I genuinely believe, is one of the most empowering things you can do for young people. Teach them how to think, solve problems, make decisions, come up with ideas.
And when I was young, when people used to say, "What's your hobby?" Thinking, and they used to look at me like, "Are you like, what does that mean?" And I think, when we met, I mean, I had already started reading his stuff. So I think that was part of our connection. What do you think your unique value proposition is? If you were not here tomorrow, what will we miss about you?
I mean, something I really had to think about, because I woke up the other day and I thought, if I disappeared, would anybody miss me? It was a really interesting question. So I think, maybe my mom would and some people would. But then I was trying to think, what is that value proposition? So I think I wouldn't say superpowers, but I think something that I developed a talent for over the years, and I think it's evolved. I don't think it happened that way. But I'm a really bad listener sometimes. You say something and my brain jumps to the idea. The worst thing someone can say to me is, the problem is, because I think I have to solve it. It's like, let me solve your problem. But I developed an ability, something I learned to do at college was I learned to type and listen concurrently. So when people talk, I can capture their thoughts. So I can sit in a room with people and I can have 6 people talking. I don't necessarily have to look at them, but I'm listening to the various conversations, and I can somehow extract a theme and take the theme into an image. I can sort of connect dots and then make it visual and simple. And I don't know if that's a USP, because I'm not quite sure how to describe it, but it's almost an ability to distill. I wouldn't say complexity, because I don't think I'm smart enough to understand complexity, but I can take what appears to be complex in a room and try and extract the essence.
I mean, that's what you have to do as a strategist anyway. So it is a skill that is required. Um, and it was the 2nd of June 2016 when your Facebook post popped up on my cell screen saying, "Today was my last radiation session, yay." In that post, you also shared this. You said, "A cancer diagnosis can be a lonely path. You can't delegate or outsource this to anyone. I have just wanted to keep my head down and survive. Above ground was the only goal." Can you share the wisdom you learned about life and living since your diagnosis in 2015?
Sure, that's a big one. When something takes you by surprise, it's like you're not. That was the last thing I anticipated was going to happen in my life. I do know that I'd probably been putting myself under a lot of pressure and stress, but it wasn't. It was. I was. What's that saying? Blindsided. It was just completely unanticipated. And what was interesting about that experience is how other people responded. So what you want, or I don't know what you want, but what I felt like I wanted was attention, but I didn't want to ask for help.
Yeah.
The weirdest thing. It's like you want people to come and support you, but you don't want too many people around you. So it's this sort of absolute paradox of seeing who shows up and who doesn't. And trying to deal with your own, you sort of go inside quite quickly. And interestingly, I made a decision, as you've quoted, to put my head down and just keep going. And I think it's only now in lockdown that I've stopped moving. And I think the reflection on that experience is only really coming home to roost now. but I was fascinated by other people's experiences. So you get the diagnosis, but someone else is in tears. And I'm like, why are you crying? I'm not dead. It's just really interesting to see how other people respond. And
Is it our discomfort at what this is? It's more our feeling about the situation.
yeah, I think it provokes things in other people. It provokes the reflection is almost like other people's discontent. And I said, right, I've got to figure this out. So get your head down and get through this thing called radiation. I was fortunate that I didn't have to go through chemo. It was option. It was an option at the time, but I elected not to. And then I just said, right. So as soon as I could get up and start moving, I did. I didn't want to sit still. So,
Because she used to run marathons.
well, not marathons. I'm not a marathon runner. I've done a few half marathons, but I did do one. I think about 18 months later.
Wow.
It was almost like just to prove to myself a half marathon in France at night. It was fun. So
better you than me. Talk to me about the ego versus humility. You believe that ego is nothing to be ashamed of, that we must embrace it.
yeah, I mean, I've often said, or one of the things that I think I wrote it once. I said we need ego to enter the race, but we need humility when we win it, because nobody likes an arrogant winner. So it's almost as if you've got to think something of yourself to put yourself forward enough to participate.
Yeah.
In our industry, if someone's completely without ego, then we'd probably be doing Buddhist meditations. But the reality is, if we stand up and present for a living, anybody that does that must have some kind of ego. It's impossible that we don't. But if you allow ego to become hubris, it becomes a dangerous thing. And the minute you're successful, if your ego is too visible, it's almost a detractor rather than a tractor.
Yeah.
People move away from us if we are too egotistical, but we need a healthy dose of ego to be able to get up and do what we've done for so many years.
Yeah.
So I think the more successful a person becomes, the closer you are to winning, whether that's a leadership race, an athletic race, anything where you have the perception of winning. Winning is always at the expense of someone losing. That's the only way one can win.
Yeah.
But when you win, I think people most value humility.
Yes. When somebody powerful who has humility, it's the most intoxicating thing to see.
Yeah. And I think when ego is what kind of gets us there, it's a difficult switch to flick when you suddenly realize, actually, I need to get off my high horse and take a humility pill now. But I think most respected leaders have a dose of humility. I can't say I've always succeeded at that.
Do you suffer from the imposter syndrome? And if yes, how are you handling it? And what wisdom can you share?
I think the answer is yes. I think it would be difficult to say that I don't, given the circumstances. My whole career, I've always been absolutely blown away that somebody would want to phone and say, could Nicola come and present this? And I'm like, me? You really want me to do it? I think it's declined a bit in the last few years. But I used to be blown away that the phone would ring and people would say, could you come back for a second time? It almost like tickled me on the inside. It was the strangest of feelings and always lovely to hear. So I think the way that I try and see humanity is as equal. I like to think that when we go to offices, in the days when we used to go to offices, if I had someone in the car with me or if I was in the car with someone else, I'd always notice or recognize how they treated the security guard getting into the complex or in building. And never when we're early, because when you're early, you've got the time to be gracious. But when you're late and under pressure, it's how do you treat people then?
Yes.
And it's always been like a little bit of a litmus test for me. It's like, let's go to a meeting and let's be a little bit late and see how you treat people. And I know we all have patience, and I know there are times when we're all inappropriate with each other. But I think fundamentally, it's the richer than or smarter than does not equal better than. And the fact that someone might have, more education, more money, doesn't make them more of a human being. I don't think that's true. So I think if everyone is unique, the question I used to ask is if everyone is unique, which is true, then if everyone is something, it's a collective. So what's the collective noun for unique? And I say, well, it's the same. We're all the same.
You believe that having a sense of humor can get you through life, and what you've gone through, I can imagine. Talk to me about how you've been going through this pandemic, with the stress, the trauma, the death, the loss of livelihoods that people are going through. How much laughter have you experienced in the last few months?
Yeah, that's a good one. I remember Hillary Clinton in an interview said, "Don't take yourself so seriously." I think I do have a great sense of humor, and I've got the ability to laugh often at myself, I hope. I don't like laughing at other people's expense. It's not my nature, I don't think. But I find a lot of life comical. I think we do we take some things way too seriously. A global pandemic is different. This was again an unanticipated event. It caught everybody by surprise, and I think I was very serious in this last few months. And to begin, in fact, in lockdown level 1, I was almost starting to experience joy again for what felt like the first time since, before surgery and things like that. And this absolute sense of calm and stillness allowed a certain level of energy to come back to the surface. When you're running, you're not running physically, but when you're busy, it takes your mind off life. So I quite enjoyed level 1 and level 2. But there's a seriousness to this. I didn't find what was going on it wasn't a laughable thing. And only because there was just a vast amount of uncertainty. People are losing their businesses. People are struggling to try and figure out things like homeschooling and the stress of people passing away in hospital and not being able to say goodbye to your family. I wouldn't say I was traumatized, but I wasn't even fearful. It was just like, gosh, it was like an empathy for the world of what people were going through. And of course, a lot of eyes on Italy, and then wondering how South Africa would respond and what would happen here with so many people with HIV and in disadvantaged communities. Only to realize, I think that South Africa has got huge levels of resilience, massive resilience and immunity.
I hope we have learned that about ourselves, Nicola. Do you think we are seeing that? Do you think we recognize that in ourselves?
I sometimes worry. I wouldn't say worry as in it keeps me awake at night. But when I think about South Africa, I wish as a nation, more people were more confident. It's the most incredible country, but to be confident, you've got to be comfortable in your skin.
Yeah.
And there are certain things in life where I think I'm confident. If I've got to walk into a boardroom with a room full of execs, I don't feel nervous any longer. But there are certain aspects of my life where I lack confidence. So we can't be confident in everything. We'll be confident in different areas. But I think if we could help build confidence through a sense of achievement and accomplishment, it would go a long way to nation build.
Yeah. Um, are you trying to leave any legacy, and what is that?
When I think of legacy, I think of my grandmother. And my grandmother passed away at 90, and she was in an old age home when she passed away, but she still had a goal to get out. At 90, her ambition was to get out of the nursing home that she'd just been put in. And when we went to her funeral, my brother, myself, and my sister all arrived in Worcestershire in England. And I'd actually been speaking at a conference in Durban. There was about 900 women. And I had to jump on a plane, meet someone in Joburg, swap bags, land in the UK. I drove to a friend's house. I showered. I put on my sort of morning attire, and I drove to where the service was happening. And I don't know how I missed this point, but I didn't think my grandmother would be there. I thought this was a sort of a memorial service, but I didn't think it was the service.
Yes.
So I arrived at the, it wasn't a church, it was like a chapel, and it was full. So I'm thinking, maybe I'm in the wrong place. You know, at 90, there can't be that many people. So then my parents arrived with my grandmother, and we called her Nan, and there were flowers in the hearse saying Nan. And I looked at my parents and I said, is it here? And I was doing the eulogy, so I was nervous. And they said, yes, this is it. So I said, there's a lot of people here. So after the service, we went to a hotel down the road, where the wake, and there were all these people. So my brother and my sister and I were like, who are all these people? Some of them we knew, obviously, but there were a lot of people that we didn't know. And during that period, people would come up to us and say, oh, you won't remember me, but I'm Mrs. So-and-so's daughter. Oh, you won't know us, but I'm Mr. So-and-so's son. And what we realized is at my grandmother's wake, the people who came to the funeral were the children of the people she'd employed during her career.
Wow.
Their parents had passed away, and the children of those people came to honor my grandmother.
Wow.
And so when I think of legacy, I think of her.
Mm.
You know, often we want to build a building, or we want to, you know, write a book and do all these great things. But I think maybe legacy is how we live, not what we leave behind, but how we live.
Wow. I like that story. The grandchildren part. I wasn't expecting that part. That was the twist. You're an avid reader. What is the best book you've read this year? What are the key areas of wisdom that you want us to pull out and will make it worthwhile for us to pick it up as well?
Cool. So I'm an avid two-thirds reader. I get like 2/3 into the book and I'm like, no, I can't any longer. And a few years ago, I used to read voraciously. I mean, I've literally got loads of books. And for a lot of time, I can remember titles, themes, subjects. I really was, having failed school, I think I had to find a way to educate myself. So, and I struggle to read. Reading is not easy for me. I have to, you know, be in a quiet room with bright lights, and I can't lie down and read a book. I've got to sit at a desk or something like that. And I've read very, very little fiction. Almost everything that I've read has been non-fiction. Non-fiction, yeah. Business book. Mm-hmm. So this year, I've been working quite hard at sort of breaking habits. So I kicked off the year, and I actually did finish this book. It was by Joe Dispenza, called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. Mm-hmm. And I did it both as an audio book and as a physical book. Very, very interesting. He basically says that you have to become someone else to change your habits, you literally have to become a different personality. So that was one that I thought was great. The second one, which was my 2/3 book, was by Charles Duhigg, which is The Power of Habit.
Oh, yeah, I got it. Yeah.
It's a great book, but I read that because I wanted to recite parts of it because we reference it in multipliers, and Liz Wiseman in the multipliers program talks about the habit chain. So I wanted to know what that was. But by far, I think the better book, and I'm 1/3 in, but I'm doing the work of this book. I'm not just reading it.
Yeah.
And it's called Atomic Habits by, I think it's James Clear. Atomic Habit. And it was actually recommended to me by a client at the end of last year. And I couldn't find it. And then sort of when we could go back to bookshops, I found a copy. So Atomic Habits, and it's really about your identity. So far, it's the one I would recommend.
What's still on your bucket list to do?
I thought of this question and I realized that if I had like 5 buckets in front of me, 4 of them have been full of work and one of them has been full of fun attached to work. In fact, maybe 3 too. So most of my life events and experiences have been attached to traveling overseas because I was working. I haven't done that much travel independently of doing something for a client. So that I've actually got lots of things. But I'm only sort of defining my buckets now. I definitely want to ride a quarter horse in Yosemite National Park.
That's an interesting, I've never heard anybody put that on their bucket list. Yeah.
A quarter horse in Yosemite National Park. And I met someone a couple of weekends ago in Notuk, and they've actually got a quarter horse. So I might get an opportunity to practice. Yeah.
Yes. That's an interesting one.
That book, I mean, so many people have said, where's your book? Where's your book? And I'm like, yeah. And I have written so much because writing is a way that I clear my mind. So I'm often just sitting down and typing down thoughts. But I've kind of sketched out about 3 of them on my laptop over the years, but I haven't had the courage to say press send. So I guess pressing send, and that's the failure bit. You know, there's me saying, oh, just experiment, it's okay to fail. But when it comes to something like that, I'm too scared. So there's something holding me back there. Maybe it's to do with the academic or lack of.
Somebody needs to press that send for you.
You got to press send, and I'm too scared to. I've been too scared.
And it will be an amazing book, I'm sure.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've got to, when I go back sometimes and I read what I've written, some of it's actually quite comical. And some of it's quite serious. So it's almost, I used to have a recurring nightmare. My sister doesn't know this, but she's about to find out. But I had a recurring nightmare for many years. And I was on a stage in a school. And you know, schools used to have like wooden panels around them. You know, everything was wooden. It was almost like a CSIR in the 1990s. And my sister is on stage with me, and there's ABBA music playing.
Oh dear.
ABBA music. Yeah. And I'm trying to get the room to be serious, and she's trying to get them to be funny. So every time I try and do my bit, she keeps playing ABBA music to disrupt me. And so I spoke to a psychologist or someone about it, and she says that's the 2 sides of your personality. She said the one is like serious, and the other one is like the comic. So it's always like, I think.
And which one is winning is the question.
Yeah, well, I think I want the comic to win for the next 10 years. I like her more.
Nicola, we can chat the entire day. It has been such fun. I'm so happy we finally got to connect. What is the final wisdom you will like to leave us with?
You know, Dudu, I think I tweeted it probably, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. And it said, life equals energy plus time. The trick is to have enough energy to have the time of your life.
Wow.
So if we're above ground, be grateful. You can't give anybody what you don't have yourself. And, you know, if you're healthy, energy is everything. And I don't just mean energy as in running around, but just, you know, life is energy. Time is all we have.
Yes.
So expend your energy and your time wisely.
That is the perfect place to leave it, because that I believe in that so much. I really hope you enjoyed that one. That was Nicola Tyler, another episode of Wisdom Personified, Conversations with Dudu Msomi. Until next time. Please don't forget to subscribe, and for future notifications, please press the bell so that you are the first one to know. We really enjoy having you on this journey. Until next time.